Once upon a time, there was a man named Thomas who had married two beautiful wives, Margaret and Ruth. They all lived together under one roof as a seemingly happy family. Margaret, the first wife, was a quiet and kind woman, loved by many for her gentle nature. She had one daughter, Lilian, a bright and cheerful girl known for her exceptional dancing skills. Every time she performed in school competitions, she brought home medals, making her mother and teachers proud. Ruth, the second wife, was more outspoken and assertive. She had two children, Elizabeth and Festus. The three of them were close, often keeping to themselves, but they never openly showed any dislike toward Margaret or Lilian. At least, that's what Margaret and Lilian believed. Lilian loved her family. She always tried to include her father, stepmother, and step-siblings in her achievements. She would run home excitedly after every win, hoping to see their smiles, but they only gave half-hearted nods. Still, she convinced herself that it was enough, that they cared in their own way. One day, when Lilian was 15, she was selected to represent her school in a big dance competition. This was her biggest performance yet, and she wanted her entire family to be there. She begged them to come, her eyes shining with hope. "I can't, Lilian," her father said, avoiding her gaze. "I have a meeting with the elders." "I would love to, dear," Ruth added, "but I have a community women's gathering. It's very important." Elizabeth smirked. "I have a group study, and Festus has football practice. We're busy." Lilian's heart sank. It was always like this. Excuses. No one ever showed up. Only her mother truly cared. Margaret saw the disappointment in her daughter's eyes and placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, my love. I will be there," cheering the loudest. A bright smile returned to Lilian's face. "Promise, Mama?" "I promise." The day of the competition arrived. Lilian stood backstage, peeking into the crowd. Her heart pounded with excitement and nerves. Then she spotted an empty seat, the one she had reserved for her mother. She frowned. "Where is Mama?" she whispered. Minutes turned into an hour. The competition was about to begin, but Margaret had not arrived. Meanwhile, Margaret was on her way, hurrying through the busy streets. She had dressed in her finest clothes, eager to see her daughter shine. She imagined the way Lilian's face would light up when she saw her in the audience. Then, in a cruel twist of fate, a speeding truck ran a red light. The impact was sudden, brutal. Margaret's body hit the pavement with a sickening thud. The sound of screeching tires filled the air. People screamed. It was a fatal accident. At the competition, Lilian's name was announced. She stepped onto the stage, still searching for her mother. Something felt wrong, but she pushed the thought aside. She danced. Every step, every turn, she gave it her all, imagining her mother watching proudly. By the time she finished, the audience erupted in applause. But Lilian wasn't smiling. She rushed backstage, her hands trembling as she grabbed her phone. There were multiple missed calls. Her heart pounded as she dialed back. The voice on the other end was not her mother's. "Lilian, I'm so sorry." The words didn't make sense at first. Then, like a wave crashing over her, reality sank in. Her mother was gone. No, it's a mistake," Lilian whispered, shaking her head violently. "Mama promised." She promised. She dropped the phone. The world around her blurred. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, crying uncontrollably. She had danced her heart out, thinking her mother was watching. But Margaret had been fighting for her life in the hospital, and no one from her family had told her. At home, Thomas and Ruth sat in silence. There was no sadness in Ruth's eyes, only a look of quiet satisfaction. And that was when Lilian finally understood. They had never truly been one happy family. After her mother's death, Lilian's world crumbled. The house that once felt warm and safe became a place of silent torment. She noticed the change almost immediately. Ruth no longer pretended to care. The kindness in her voice disappeared, replaced with harsh commands. She was hardly given food to eat. Ruth never stopped maltreating her at every given opportunity. "Fetch water," she barked one morning, tossing a bucket at Lilian's feet. "And don't take all day." Lilian, still mourning, looked at her stepmother in confusion. "But Elizabeth and Festus?" "They have school," Ruth snapped. "Unlike you, they have a future." Lilian's breath caught in her throat. "But what about me?" Ruth smirked. "You? School. Who will pay for it? Do you think money falls from the sky?" Lilian turned to her father, her last hope. "Papa, please." Thomas barely looked at her. He sat in his chair, staring at nothing, as if lost in a world of his own. He had been that way since Margaret died, distant, absent. When he did speak, his words were empty, almost mechanical. "Do as your mother says, Lilian." She flinched. "Your mother." He meant Ruth, not Margaret. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she swallowed them down. She had no choice. Days turned into weeks, and her suffering grew. She was no longer Lilian, the bright and talented dancer. She was a servant in her own home. Every morning, while Elizabeth and Festus prepared for school, Lilian was handed a broom and a pile of chores. She scrubbed floors, washed clothes, and cooked meals, all while her stepmother and step-siblings lounged around, treating her like she was invisible. Then came the final blow. One evening, she overheard Ruth talking to a visitor. "She's of no use to us," Ruth said, her voice dripping with disdain. "No education, no skills, just another mouth to feed." The visitor, a man with a thick beard, chuckled. "I might know someone interested in taking her off your hands." Lilian's blood ran cold. Taking me off their hands? What did that mean? Before she could process the conversation, another tragedy struck. Her father lost his job. Thomas had been a respected foreman at a construction company, but after months of mismanagement, the business collapsed. Workers were let go, and Thomas found himself among them. At first, he tried to remain hopeful. "Something else will come up," he assured the family. "I just need time." But time wasn't kind to him. Money ran out quickly. The food portions shrank. The laughter that once filled the house vanished. And Ruth, who had tolerated her husband's presence only because of his income, began to show her true colors. "You're useless," she hissed one night as Thomas sat in their modest home, his face buried in his hands. "You can't even provide for your own family." Thomas didn't respond. He simply sighed, defeated. Lilian watched everything unfold with a heavy heart. She had hoped foolishly that with her father now home, he would notice her suffering. But he was too lost in his own misery to care. And then, one fateful night, Ruth made a decision. Lilian was going to be sent away. But not to school, not to a better life, to a man she had never met. One day when Lilian was 19, Ruth made a decision that would change her life forever. Lilian had grown into a beautiful young woman, despite the hardships she endured. Her dreams of furthering her education had not faded, but they felt more distant than ever. She spent her days doing endless chores and, when she could, sneaking off to do menial jobs for a few coins. She had no time for herself, and certainly no time for love. That was why she was horrified when she overheard Ruth speaking with a visitor late one evening. "She's old enough now," Ruth said in a hushed tone, "and she has no future here anyway." "Will she agree?" the visitor asked. "She has no choice," Ruth said coldly. Lilian's heart pounded. An arranged marriage? She had never even met the man, and from what she gathered, he was much older. No, never. She had already lost her dreams of education, of dancing, of being free. She would not lose this too. That night, when the house was silent, Lilian made her decision. She packed a small bundle, just a few clothes, and the little money she had managed to save from her secret jobs. Then, barefoot and trembling, she slipped out into the cold night. The road ahead was not easy. For days, she wandered from village to village, doing whatever work she could find, washing clothes, carrying firewood, even sweeping market stalls. Hunger gnawed at her stomach, and there were nights she slept on an empty belly. She had no home, no one to turn to. She found shelter in abandoned, unfinished buildings, curling up in dark corners to hide from the dangers of the night. But she refused to return. With every coin she earned, she saved. When she had enough, she used it to start a small bottled water and sachet water roadside business. She set up a little roadside stall under a tree, hoping to make an honest living. One afternoon, as the sun blazed in the sky, a sleek black car pulled up beside her stall. The doors opened, and an elderly couple stepped out. The man wore a faded traditional outfit, his feet in dusty sandals, while the woman wrapped a simple scarf around her head. Their clothes looked ordinary, almost too simple for people driving such a fine car. "Young lady," the man said with a warm smile, "give us 2 bottles of water." Lilian quickly handed them the water. "That will be 200 naira, sir." The woman handed her crisp 3,000 naira notes. "Keep the change, my dear." Lilian hesitated, staring at the money. It was more than she had earned all day. But she shook her head and handed back the extra notes. "I only take what I have earned," she said firmly. The couple exchanged glances, impressed. "You are an honest girl," the man said. "What is your name?" "Lilian." The woman smiled. "You are a good girl, Lilian. We will see you again." Days passed, and Lilian continued with her little business. Then one evening, just as she was packing up, the same car stopped by her stall. The couple stepped out again, this time with a different expression. They spoke with her, asking how she survived on the streets, how she came to be selling water alone. Lilian, cautious but desperate for human kindness, told them a little, how she had run from home to escape an unwanted marriage, how she wanted an education but had no means. They listened, nodding thoughtfully. Then the man cleared his throat. "My wife and I need someone to help around our home," he said. "The job comes with food, shelter, and a small salary. Would you be interested?" Lilian's eyes widened. A job? A roof over her head? Food? She didn't have to think twice. Yes, I will do it. For the first time in years, hope stirred in her heart. She didn't know who these people were, nor did she know what the future held. But she knew one thing: she was not going back. And this time, she would fight for her dreams. Chief Igwebike and his wife had a son named Richmond who lived in the United States for many years. He was to come home back soon. The day Richmond Igwebike returned home from the States, the entire household buzzed with excitement. Chief Igwebike and his wife, Clara, stood outside their grand mansion, their eyes filled with pride as they watched the sleek black car pull up to the driveway. Richmond had been away for years, studying and building his career abroad. Now he was back, and his parents had plans for him, plans he knew nothing about yet. Inside the house, Lilian stood near the entrance, her hands nervously clasped. She had been asked to help with the luggage. Though she was grateful for the job, she was still getting used to life in the Igwebike household. The car door opened and Richmond stepped out. Tall, broad-shouldered, and strikingly handsome, he had the air of someone who had seen the world. His smooth, dark skin contrasted with the crisp white shirt he wore, and his confident stride exuded authority. Then his eyes met Lilian's. For a moment, everything around him faded. She wasn't dressed in anything fancy, just a simple maid's uniform. Her hair was neatly tied back, and her face was free of makeup. But there was something about her. A quiet beauty, a softness in her eyes that seemed untouched by vanity. Richmond had dated many women before, sophisticated, wealthy, glamorous women who knew how to turn heads. But none of them had ever made his heart stutter the way it did now. He didn't understand it. It was ridiculous. "She's just a maid," he told himself. "Why am I staring?" Lilian quickly lowered her gaze, unaware of the storm she had just caused inside him. "Welcome, sir," she said politely, stepping forward to take one of his suitcases. Her voice, soft, gentle. Richmond swallowed hard, forcing himself to look away. "Just take them inside," he muttered, brushing past her. That was the first time he told himself it was nothing, just a fleeting attraction. But he was wrong. Days passed, and Richmond found himself noticing Lilian more than he should. The way she moved, the quiet grace with which she handled her chores, the way she always kept her head down but carried herself with dignity. She never sought attention, yet she held it effortlessly. And it was driving him insane. So he did the only thing he could think of. He ignored her. He spoke to her only when necessary. If she greeted him, he barely responded. When she served him meals, he kept his eyes glued to his phone. One evening, as she cleared the dining table, she accidentally knocked over a glass. It shattered on the floor. Richmond, who had been reading nearby, snapped his head up. "Can't you be careful?" he snapped. Lilian froze, startled. I'm sorry, sir," she said, quickly bending down to clean it up. He watched her, his jaw tightening. "Why am I doing this?" he asked himself. Because the more he stayed around her, the harder it became to fight the pull. One evening, he saw her standing outside in the garden, staring up at the stars. She looked peaceful, unaware that he was watching from the balcony. "Who are you, Lilian?" He had never struggled like this before. But no matter how much he tried to deny it, the truth was becoming clearer. He wanted her, not just in passing, not just for a fleeting moment, and it terrified him. Now, back in Lilian's family home, Ruth sat comfortably on a wooden stool, fanning herself lazily as she prepared to welcome the long-awaited suitor. Her heart was light, her mood high. The deal had already been sealed. She had taken the man's money many times, promising to give him Lilian as a bride, even when she knew Lilian had already escaped. She had no intention of returning that money. But what did it matter? Once the man arrived, she would convince him to wait, pretend Lilian was coming back soon, or, if it came to that, offer him any other girl instead but not his beloved daughter, Elizabeth. She has plans to marry Elizabeth to a rich man, not a common man, like the man coming for Lilian's hands in marriage. If only she knew better. The sound of footsteps outside made her sit up straighter. A moment later, a man dressed in a faded kaftan entered, accompanied by a younger companion. Ruth's face lit up in false warmth. "Ah, my in-law, welcome." The older man nodded, lowering himself onto a seat with quiet dignity. He had a calm, measured presence, though his appearance spoke of humble means. His beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes held wisdom, but there was nothing about him that suggested wealth or power. Ruth barely spared a glance at his companion, who remained silent beside him. "I have come to finalize the marriage arrangement," the man said. "I trust all is ready." "Of course," Ruth said quickly, forcing a bright smile. "We have been waiting for you." She turned her head and called loudly toward the inner room, pretending. "Lilian, come out and greet your husband." Silence. Ruth waited a few seconds, then called again, louder this time. "Lilian, don't keep us waiting." Still nothing. A shadow of annoyance crossed the old man's face. "Is something wrong?" Ruth let out a nervous laugh. "Ah, you know how shy young girls can be. Maybe she's feeling a little nervous." She turned to Festus, her son, who had been watching from the corner with barely concealed amusement. "Go and bring her out." Festus leaned against the wall, smirking. "She's not here." Ruth's fake smile faltered. "What do you mean she's not here?" Festus shrugged. "But you know she ran away, mother. Days ago." Ruth's heart pounded in her chest, but she quickly composed herself. She let out another forced chuckle, waving her hand dismissively. Don't mind the boy. He doesn't know what he's saying." The old man's gaze sharpened. "She ran away." Ruth feigned shock. "Who told you that?" "My daughter is here. Maybe she just stepped out to fetch water." Festus laughed. "Mother, stop pretending. You know she's gone." Ruth shot him a deadly glare. She turned back to the suitor, shaking her head in fake frustration. "I don't know what has gotten into the boy. Children of these days, always saying nonsense." She forced another laugh, shifting in her seat. "But don't worry, my in-law. Lilian will be back soon. She just needed time to adjust to the idea of marriage. You know how young girls can be. Give me some days, and she will be here waiting for you." The old man's lips pressed together. He studied Ruth for a long, quiet moment. Then he leaned back. "I see." A heavy silence filled the room. Finally, he asked, "And your other daughter? She is of age too, yes?" Ruth stiffened. "Elizabeth." She had been saving Elizabeth for someone rich and powerful. A man with status. There was no way she was wasting her on this old, ordinary-looking man. She forced another laugh. "Oh no, my Elizabeth is still very young. Not ready for marriage yet." The old man nodded slowly. "Not ready." Ruth smiled tightly. Yes. She is too young to be given away." The old man let out a chuckle. "I understand." He stood, adjusting his kaftan. "Thank you for your time." Ruth felt her stomach twist. Something about his tone unsettled her. As he walked toward the door, his companion followed, but not before casting one last glance at the house. Once they stepped outside, the younger man turned to the old one. "Chief, now you have seen for yourself." The elderly suitor nodded, his face now unreadable. He was Chief Igwebike, Richmond's father. He had disguised himself to test the character of the family his son's future wife would come from. And now he had his answer. Lilian had not been given away with love or care. They practically wanted to sell her. And the woman who had deceived him today had unknowingly thrown away the greatest opportunity of her life. Meanwhile, in Chief Igwebike's mansion, Richmond sat on the balcony of his family's grand mansion, watching the sunset cast golden streaks across the sky. But his mind was elsewhere on her. Lilian. She was nothing like the women he had known. The ones who wore expensive perfumes and draped themselves in designer clothes, chasing his wealth and status. No, Lilian was different. Humble. Hardworking. She carried herself with quiet grace, her hands always busy with work, her eyes filled with quiet determination. And yet, despite himself, he was drawn to her. He had tried to ignore it, even convinced himself it was mere attraction. After all, she was just a maid. But it was more than that. He found himself stealing glances at her when she wasn't looking, admiring the way she moved, how she never complained, how she treated everyone with kindness. One evening, unable to sleep, he wandered through the house and heard the soft rustle of pages turning. He followed the sound to the kitchen, where a dim candle flickered on the table. There she was. Lilian sat with a book in her lap, reading intently, her lips moving slightly as if tasting the words. Her brows furrowed in concentration, and Richmond felt something tighten in his chest. A maid who read at night? Curious, he took a step closer. What are you reading? Lilian gasped, snapping the book shut. She turned quickly, her eyes wide with surprise. I was just reading, sir. Richmond ignored the title of sir. He stepped forward, picking up the book she had hidden behind her back. It was a school textbook. You want to study? He asked. Lilian hesitated, then nodded. Yes. I dream of going to university one day. Her voice was quiet but firm, determined. Richmond stared at her, feeling something shift inside him. Admiration, respect, and something else he wasn't ready to name. For the first time in his life, he wanted something that had nothing to do with wealth, power, or prestige. He wanted her, but he did not know what to do with all he was feeling for Lilian. A few days later, Chief Igwebike's village hosted its grand festival. Colorful fabrics draped the marketplace, the scent of roasted meat filled the air, and drums beat in rhythmic harmony. Richmond's parents insisted he attend. He didn't want to go at first, but when he learned Lilian was permitted to attend, he found himself looking forward to it. Lilian, unaware of the significance of the night, was just happy to experience the festival. She walked through the crowd, marveling at the vibrant decorations, the cheerful dancing, the beating drums. And then, unexpectedly, an opportunity came. A group of dancers preparing for the evening's performance were short of one person. Seeing her standing nearby, one of the elders recognized her. You, he said excitedly. Aren't you Lilian, the girl who used to win school competitions those days? Lilian froze. It had been years since she had last danced, since her mother had died, since her dreams had been buried under suffering. She hesitated, but then the crowd cheered, and something inside her stirred. The music began, fast and thrilling, the rhythm pulsing in her veins. Without thinking, she stepped forward, her body moving naturally with the beat. Richmond, watching from a VIP section, felt his breath catch. She was mesmerizing. The way she moved, effortlessly, beautifully, her feet barely touching the ground. She danced like she belonged to the wind, free and unchained. For the first time, Richmond saw her as she truly was, a woman full of passion, dreams, and untamed spirit. His heart pounded. He had already admired her. But now, he could not deny that he was in love with Lilian, their maid. Just as the crowd erupted in applause, a sharp scream cut through the air. You! Stop! Lilian barely had time to react before rough hands grabbed her arms. She turned, her heart pounding, and froze. It was Ruth, her stepmother. Elizabeth and Festus stood behind her, their faces twisted with anger and wicked triumph. You thought you could run away. Ruth hissed, shaking her. You disgraced our family, and now you're dancing in public. The festival fell into shocked silence as murmurs rippled through the crowd. Richmond stood, his hands clenching into fists. Let her go, he said, his voice dangerously calm. Ruth whirled to face him, her expression furious. Who are you to interfere? This is my daughter. You have no right to touch her like that. Richmond stepped forward, his entire body tense. Not after what you did to her. The crowd gasped, and then another voice, calm but firm. Ruth. Chief Igwebike stepped onto the stage, his piercing gaze locking onto her. Recognition dawned on Ruth's face, followed by horror. You, she stammered, taking a step back. Chief Igwebike's eyes never wavered. Yes, it's me, the old suitor you deceived, the one you took money from in exchange for your stepdaughter. So Lilian is your stepdaughter? What a beautiful coincidence. Ruth's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Ruth could not believe her eyes and ears. He was the suitor. He disguised himself. He was testing them all along. Confusion and shame flooded Ruth's face. If only she knew Chief was a rich man and wanted a wife for his son, she would have given him her daughter, Elizabeth, out in marriage. Chief Igwebike's voice cut through the noise. I was looking for a good wife for my son, one who wouldn't marry him for money. His eyes turned to Lilian, filled with pride. Nothing will give me more joy if Lilian marries my son, Richmond. Lilian stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. Richmond, however, knew exactly what he wanted. He took Lilian's hand, threw her gently to his chest, and staring into her eyes. Gasps. Ruth staggered backward. No, 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 this cannot be happening. Ruth said. Richmond's heart pounded as he pulled Lilian gently into his chest, shielding her from the stares of the crowd. His arms wrapped protectively around her, as if he was afraid she would disappear. Lilian, breathless and overwhelmed, looked up at him with wide, confused eyes. He cupped her face tenderly, his thumb tracing the soft curve of her cheek. His voice, deep and steady, was filled with emotion as he spoke. "Lilian, from the moment I saw you, I tried to fight what I felt. I told myself it was nothing, just admiration, just attraction. But it wasn't. It was more. It was the way you carried yourself with quiet strength, the way you never let life break you. It was the way you worked hard, the way you dreamed even when the world tried to crush those dreams. You were never just a maid to me. You were the most incredible woman I have ever met." Lilian's lips parted, but no words came out. She was drowning in his gaze, in the sincerity of his words. Richmond smiled softly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "I have had everything in life, money, status, privilege. But none of it ever mattered until you. You taught me what truly matters. You taught me love, and I don't want to spend another day without you." The crowd had gone completely silent. The festival, the people, the world, none of it existed in that moment. It was just the two of them. Richmond took a deep breath and leaned his forehead against hers. "Lilian, I don't have a ring. I don't have a grand speech prepared. But I have my heart, and it belongs to you. It has always belonged to you." He pulled back slightly, gazing into her tear-filled eyes. "Marry me. I love you, and I want to spend my life proving it to you. Say yes, Lilian." Tears slipped down Lilian's cheeks as her heart swelled with emotion. For years, she had dreamed of a love like this, pure, true, and unconditional. And now, it was standing right in front of her. With a shaky breath, she whispered, "Yes." A slow, breathtaking smile spread across Richmond's face. And then, in front of the entire village, he leaned down and kissed her, softly, deeply, as if sealing a promise only their hearts could understand. The crowd erupted in cheers, but neither of them heard it. In that moment, nothing else mattered. She had finally found love. And this time, no one would take it away from her. Hello friends, if you want to see part 2, kindly type part 2 in the comments section. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video and share. God bless you.